beautiful thing about track and field is that the lanes on a track don't discriminate. They don't care what uniform you're wearing or what conference you represent. Once you go out there, your performances are your performances. And the team logo by itself is not going to make you any faster. College track and field at its highest level is basically professional level. Notice, I didn't say anything about a division because it really doesn't matter anymore. You can't win an NCAA championship in any of them if you're not good enough to hold your own against the world's best. It's the reason why college athletes from every single division were at the US Olympic trials. And interestingly enough, they did not come alone because high school athletes were there as well. And if you were paying very close attention to the games in Paris, there were college athletes who even came back home with medals. But because everything I just said is simply stating facts, it is also the reason why getting recruited to compete in college is way harder than most people realize. But if I'm gonna be really honest with you, I am tired of watching recruits make the exact same mistakes over and over and over again. I know why it happens because there's a lot of misinformation about what it takes to get recruited. The primary reason for that is because almost nobody is specifically talking to the track and field community. I'm also aware that I am just one man with an opinion, but I believe it is an informed one because I'm the guy who runs the high school national rankings for every single class, and I meet one-on-one with students and families to help them get what they want, which is to get recruited. So allow me to address one of the biggest questions, one of the most common ones that I keep getting from track and field recruits. Perhaps the biggest misunderstanding that most recruits have about college track and field is what is exactly happening at the Division I level. There are over 30 conferences in Division I track and field, and they are definitely not all the same. But the only conferences that most recruits want to pay attention to are the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the ACC. I could mention the Pac-12, I guess, because it's coming back in some type of form. But I'll be honest, with the teams they got on the list right now, ain't nobody checking for them in track and field. At least not on the same level anymore as the 4 conferences I just mentioned. I am not here to argue that the schools in the big conferences aren't a great opportunity for some recruits to go in track and field. But I am focusing on all the other conferences that mostly get ignored right now. There is elite level talent in every single Division I conference, as well as high level coaching represented in every single conference. Just because a school has a big name doesn't mean the coach is actually better. It just means that they have a program that maybe has a bigger budget. If as a recruit, you would rate as a 2-star, 3-star, or even a low 4-star on SCArecruiting.com, then you likely should be paying attention to the other conferences in D1, not just the big named 4 that I mentioned. I'm pretty sure that almost no recruit wants to go to college and not have big PRs. And if your goal is to compete at the highest level you possibly can, if you're not already a high 4-star level recruit and beyond, you're going to need a good coach who's committed to helping you get there. Almost every head coach in Division I recruits first with their focus on winning their conference. That means they're looking for athletes who will score inside their conference. Once they've established that, they can focus on developing you beyond that. But if you're an athlete who they don't think has a chance of helping them in the conference, you're probably an athlete they're not focused on at all. Almost the worst thing that can happen to any recruit is to end up at a program where the coach is not focused on developing your talent. You're not going to put out PRs if that is not the coach's goal when they're training you. And I don't know how to say this part without it coming out harsh, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Developing talent is a luxury, not a necessity. If I'm a head coach, or for that matter, any coach on the staff, it would be nice if my athletes ran PRs. It's just not essential for me to win. If I can get athletes who are fast enough to show up and show out without me doing much. Simply put, the biggest name programs in D1 are able to get those athletes, the ones who show up immediately and can run their high school PRs and show up at the national championship meets. But the majority of the D1 coaches for almost every other program in the smaller conferences, those coaches make their living by developing talent. At the Olympic trials in 2024, there were athletes from schools like Campbell University, as well as the Naval Academy. Notice, I said the word athletes with an S on the end. That means plural. Nobody thinks of either of those schools as track and field powerhouses, but they develop talent, enough of it, for those athletes to get all the way to the Olympic trials. And I am willing to bet that those same athletes would not have been recruited by the biggest name programs anyway. And even if they somehow got on the roster, their coaches wouldn't have been focused on developing their talent to get to that level. And there are schools that qualify for the NCAA championships that almost nobody ever expects to make it in a relay. In the women's 4x1 alone, in 2024, Howard University out of the MEAC Conference, as well as Charlotte out of the American Conference, and the University of Pennsylvania from the Ivy League, all qualified through to the NCAAs. You should never assume that a smaller D1 program simply can't compete with some of the bigger ones. And on top of that, you should also never assume that you are too good to compete in a smaller level conference. The right conference level for any recruit is likely going to be to end up at a place where you can try to score points at your conference championship meet immediately, but probably not be winning a medal when you get there. A good coach should be able to get you from simply being competitive to competing to potentially win the conference. And once you do, the next thing they're going to focus on is how you can try to take on the best in the nation at the regional meet and beyond. And what really makes track and field so special is the team aspect anyway. So if your choices are potentially maybe going to a bigger name conference program that normally is not that competitive to win that conference, potentially going to a smaller one that does compete to win their conference, you should probably take it seriously. Winning is definitely a whole lot more fun than losing. And the only thing better than winning individually is winning with your entire team. That is what head coaches in college track and field are actually trying to do. We might view track and field as an individualized sport, but I promise you, that is not how it functions for a head coach in Division I. If you're looking to get recruited by any Division I program, you should probably take a look at the SCA team ranking list for NCAA D1. They're the list for the men's teams as well as for the women's teams. I actually do it for both indoor and outdoor track and field separately. Those rankings exist to show you who the most successful teams are, based on who they compete against and who they actually beat. And notice I said the word team. I didn't just say individuals in a specific event. It's how I know that the women of Albany dominate their conference as well as their region, even if most people don't pay attention to them. And Youngstown State on the men's side does just about the exact same thing. The beautiful thing about track and field is that the lanes on the track don't discriminate. They don't care what uniform you're wearing or what conference you represent. Once you go out there, your performances are your performances. And the team logo by itself is not going to make you any faster. So if your goal is to compete at your highest level, I highly recommend that you look for a college program and a coach that believes in you as much as you do. You'll know who those are when you reach out to schools and see who actually wants to talk to you. If there is a program, especially if it's a bigger name program, that you reach out to and they don't show much interest in recruiting you, I would argue that it's really their loss, not yours. Because I'm pretty sure that the boys who sprinted for Campbell in 2024 and later ended up at the Olympic trials are very happy with the decision they made to run for the Campbell Fighting Camels, instead of whatever other big name program they might have had their eyes on. What matters is that if you're at least a 2-star recruit and up, you are probably a top recruit for at least somebody in Division I. The only question is whether or not you will find who that school is, because you might have to reach out first in order to start that conversation. If you think you need help getting recruited, you are probably right. On SCArecruiting.com, you can get a ton of resources like my free recruiting guide, detailed videos, online courses, and much more. And if nothing else, and you just really want to see more content like this, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.